Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And today I have another special guest. I'm getting to talk to Andrew Walker. Andrew is the Global Total Rewards Leader at Ernst & Young. He is also the chair of the board for WorldwideERC, and if that's not enough, he's also the founder and president of 11 Plus, and I am excited to have you on the show. Hey, Andrew, how you doing, man?
Hi, Bruce. I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm great. You know, every time I have on a guest, I always reflect on like when I met that person or when I learned about that person that's coming onto the show. And for you, I've known who you were for a long time because you have been in leadership for Worldwide ERC, but I finally got a chance to meet you in Chicago just a few weeks ago at our Global Workforce Symposium. That was a great event, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really great. It was such a good event. I mean, the content was great, but even more so, just the energy of everybody coming together was it was awesome.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. And the weather was incredible. We were just talking about that before we started recording, how great the weather was there, because in Chicago, it can get pretty cold. So good times. Hey, we're going to talk leadership today. We're going to talk mobility today. And before we get into that, I would love for you to share, just for the listeners, most probably know who Ernst & Young is, but I would love for you to share, like, who is Ernst & Young and how do you serve your customers?
Sure. Okay. So EY, as we call it shorthand, is a professional services organization. We have over 300,000 employees in 150 countries around the world. And we serve our clients in a variety of ways, from assurance, which is audit and risk management practices, consulting. We also have a part of our business that supports strategy and transactions. So if you think about mergers and acquisitions, we provide consulting advice there. And then, of course, tax services. So that's the nature of our business. If you're in the mobility field internationally, of course, you know us because we provide expat tax services.
You know, what a large organization, over 300,000 staff. You know, I was looking at your website though, and something really caught my attention when I was looking at your website, and you were talking about three different areas where you are play a big role in, and that's well-being, recognition, and compensation. But underneath that was a link to a video, and this is what caught my attention. It says, "It's yours to build." That was so cool. And so that's basically EY's, I guess, message for their employees to build what their careers, their journey.
Exactly,
talk a little bit
right
about that.
Yeah, so that is our employee value proposition. And we give our people the tools, the training, the resources to go wherever they want to go in their career. And being such a large organization, we're really exploring ways to provide a lot more internal mobility. You don't necessarily need to relocate physically, but mobility through the organization to find, where you want to go and how you want to build your career, either in a traditional way or a very untraditional way. So it's really exciting. And everything we do is sort of built around that proposition.
I love that. I actually had Kristen Cannon on last week. She is a talent acquisition leader at Fossil Group. And she was talking about the importance for companies to align their value proposition. And right, there's never been a more important time to let people know the great things about your company. So that caught I just thought that was so cool. And I'm glad you have that on your LinkedIn. I know there's probably been a lot of people that have looked at that, but it really, I just love that. It feels mission driven. And so, hey, before we get into talking leadership and mobility, I would love to hear the Andrew Walker story. We briefly talked in Chicago, but I would love to hear, like, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get into HR and mobility and leadership?
Yeah. Well, I could talk for an hour on this, but I'll give you very brief. So I grew up primarily in New England. I was born in Massachusetts, outside of Boston. lived for a while in Massachusetts and in several different communities in Connecticut. My family seemed to relocate a lot, but without any sort of help. It was always, there was a new job to move to, and we would get a mover and we'd pack up and go to the new location. When I was in college, I went to a small liberal arts college in Connecticut, in Hartford, and I thought, I really need something for my resume. All my summer jobs were working in stores or, normal, typical summer jobs, and I wanted some office experience. So in the town I was living in, Norwalk, Connecticut, there was an office park, and I went door to door, literally every single company in this office park across, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 buildings, and asked if they were hiring summer help. And the one company hiring summer help was Merrill Lynch Relocation Management. And so I got my first internship with a relocation company. But the funny thing is, the summer before that, I was a courier for a travel agency. This is before e-tickets, and business travelers needed a paper ticket to get on the plane. And so I was going to a lot of these companies, dropping tickets off, and I went to Merrill Lynch Relocation Management thinking, wow, how do they make money? What is that? That just seems kind of weird. What is it? Almost writing it off as this sort of strange thing because my family moved so often without any kind of help. But they offered me a summer job, and then, I've been in mobility ever since. And that was the summer of 1987. I went back for another summer, a couple of Christmas breaks. And then as I was leaving college, I knew I was mostly doing domestic home sale assistance. And there were people who were phenomenal at it, and tremendous respect for them, but I just sort of knew I probably wouldn't be very good at it. So I thought, let me try something else. And I called a former boss of mine who had moved into client relations at Merrill Lynch, which soon thereafter became Prudential Relocation, for those who have not been around as long. And he was actually hiring somebody. So because we had worked together and he knew me and we had sort of a relationship, he hired me in to work with him in client relations. And so that's where I got my start. It was probably, while I was there, was the best job I had. I absolutely loved the job, but there was a reorganization, and next thing I knew it, I was a domestic home sale coordinator, the exact job I didn't think I wanted to do. So I quickly found my way into the international side of the business and had been doing international mobility ever since. So that's
wow.
sort of the long story, sort of short. In terms
There is so much there. I want to ask you though. You said before the reorg, you loved it. I'm curious, like, what was it that you loved?
So I think the role that I had was in account management. I was sort of the troubleshooter. So if there was if the client had a problem, if there was a service delivery issue, they would come to me, they meaning my boss or the client, or it could go the other way. If there was a file that had some tricky issues with it, or there was an exception request or something, they would come to me, and I sort of would figure out the way to solve the problem. And I love that problem solving, but not actually having to be in the file itself, because as I later learned, I really was not good at
Oh man, I love that. I love to hear people's stories and like what really like energized them early on, because many times we get later in our career and we don't think back about those times as much, right? You had mentioned though that you had a former boss that you went to work for after that, and I always like to ask my guests about, like, it seems to me like leaders, high performers, well, they have mentors in their life. And I was just curious if you had maybe a couple of mentors that helped you along the way. And if you did, like, what did they do that made them such a great mentor?
Well, I think I had lots of mentors, and relatively early in my career, I was lamenting that I didn't have a single mentor. And I sort of realized, wait, you're not going to have one person that gives you everything. You have to sort of find the attributes that you really either want to emulate, or you're impressed by, or people you can learn from. So I have sort of lots of people that form different parts of the broader role of mentor. So in my family, I had, sadly they're long past now, but 2 amazing grandfathers. who were really, really instrumental in helping me sort of think about the kind of person I wanted to be. But then when I got into the workforce, I had some, practical mentors, just people who would say, hey, that's not the right way to do this. Let me show you the right way to do it. Not just get mad at me, but sort of help me out along the way. I also had in my early career, just an amazing figure, a guy who's a legend in the industry, a guy named Mike Neimer, who just retired a few years ago. But he was, just this amazing character. He just had such, you were dealing with an authentic person who had a really strong moral compass, knew how to do the right thing, and it was really, very big influence on me early in my career. Don't take shortcuts. Do the right thing. If you've got an issue, address it head on. Don't yell at somebody if they made a mistake. Just learn from that mistake and keep going. So, and then, as I said, as I went later in my career, I've just sort of seen things in people and said, I want to be like that, or I want to do something the way they've done it, and just spend time with them however I can.
I love that. I talk a lot about the importance of setting goals. And many times I start with, it's not about the what goals, but it's about the who goals. Like, who do you want to be? And what an amazing mentor, your grandfather, talking to you about the person you want to become, or who, you should be thinking about that. I don't remember thinking about that early on. I remember early in my career starting to hear things about, hey, look for the inspiration in people and try to like pull that in. Don't copy them, but try to make it yours.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's like a game changer. That is so good.
Yeah, it was great. I was very, very lucky.
Yeah. Oh man, mentors. And do you? I'm just curious. As a high, top level leader today, do you have like the importance of mentors? Do you have some type of mentor program or development program?
So nothing formal.
Mhm.
I like to think that I mentor. I can't think of
Mm.
one person who I would now define as my mentee, but anybody I work with, I think, how can I help them? We're all here on this planet for such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Let's all try to get to that finish line the right way, and together. And so it's not like trying to ever exploit anybody. It's more of, okay, maybe you're really good in this one particular area, but maybe let's work on this other part of what you do to maybe round you out, or address some not even shortcomings, just things they could do better. And so I've had over the years a lot of people say, hey, can you mentor me? I never feel like I'm mentoring them. We just have conversations, and people come and go, and I like to stay connected to people. So there are some people do come to mind as sticking out in my mind as people I've spent more time with like that. But I would never position it as sort of a program.
Yeah, and it's even like you listen to podcasts, you learn something from someone on a podcast, or you read a book. And I feel like John Maxwell is a great mentor of mine, but he's also a mentor for another million people.
Yeah.
And so that is so good. I appreciate you sharing that. Speaking of that, you kind of hit on something I like to also talk about, and that is, you did not start out as the global total rewards leader. You started out, entry level, and you worked your way through, and now here you are at a top level position. I always like to ask this question. I wrote a book several years ago called Find Your Lane, and it was really about finding your calling, your purpose. And I always like to ask the question, like, was there a moment when you said, I love what I do? I've found my lane, my purpose? Or were there little moments? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I think about my personal purpose and my professional purpose, and
Okay.
there's like a Venn diagram. There's a big overlap, but they're two distinct things. So
Okay.
professionally, and did I have a calling to be in mobility? No. And I don't know many people who really did wake up one day and say, oh my God, I want to go into mobility.
Mm-hmm.
They found themselves there. When I switched out of that domestic home sale experience that I was terrible at and didn't like, I got into international, and I found that it really was a great combination that leveraged sort of some of my natural abilities, but also some of my other interests that I was prepared to work on. And I'm talking to an audience that probably knows all about this, so I'm sort of singing to the choir here. But the mix of the type of day that somebody has in mobility can be so varied. From, we're the one function within HR that is not just talking to the employee on a regular day in and day out basis, but also with dealing with the family. So we really get to see and work with families in a way that is so unique, and it becomes very personal. And I have some great experiences early in my career where I was managing a small, like a just startup mobility program, and I got to know the families I was moving really, really well. Not only did I get to know them, I sometimes traveled with them to the host location to support them in their relocation. It was a phenomenal experience. Highly recommended if you can find an organization that will allow you to do that. But on the other side of it, it's very technical, and there's tax planning, there's compliance, there's policy, there's compensation. And so it's this mix of technical know-how, and you can build up an expertise in it over time, but also it's very personable, and you're dealing with people, and you are impacting lives in a way that very few other functions in HR can do. So that, to me, really, when I found myself doing the international work, I was like, okay, this is awesome. I really like it. I think my non-work, like my regular life purpose, it's funny because EY is really big on purpose. And you talked about our employee value proposition. It's yours to build, but our purpose is building a better working world. And everything we should be doing as EY should be about building a better working world. And at the same time, EY encourages all of its people to explore their own personal purpose. And so it was the first time when I got to EY and I started to ask myself, what is my personal purpose? And I reflected all the way back to my childhood of things that just came naturally, that I found myself trying to help somebody who needed help, right? And so the label I've put on it is, my purpose is to champion the underdog, is to find the people who need the help and then do whatever I can to help them. And it manifests itself in so many different ways. But it bleeds over into mobility because, the people we're supporting, the families we're moving, the organization that we're moving, are at the families are at a sort of critical point in their lives. This is going to be a transformative experience, hopefully for the better. And they really need the help. And so that, I think, is how I found that sort of why I like doing what I'm doing, making a difference and supporting people that need the help. But even, I remember I was thinking about this the other day. I think I was in like the 4th grade, and there was this kid who I knew a little bit. I didn't know him really well, but he was a tiny, very undersized. He hadn't really started to grow much yet. And people were just giving him a horrible time on the playground. And I was like, this is wrong. And so he and I basically fought off, like, I don't know, it seemed to me like the entire class, but it wasn't. It was probably like 4 or 5 kids with a Frisbee. They were trying to hit him with this Frisbee. And he and I were just catching it and like throwing it as far as we could, and they'd have to go and run after it. But I just remember feeling like, yeah, I'm going to help this kid. And then we became friends afterwards, which was cool. But it was sort of like thinking about the other people in my life who I really respected. Both of my grandfathers would have done something similar. So it sort of helps me think about, you could be in the supermarket parking lot and somebody's struggling with the cart, right? Trying to get it up the sidewalk or something. And it doesn't take anything just to stop and help them. And when you do, people are like, oh my gosh, that was so nice of you. But it takes no effort at all. So I don't know, it's kind of a blether there, but it's kind of cool to think, I was put on this planet to help make the paths for others easier, to lighten their load, whatever the analogy is.
Man, I got to tell you, I am so grateful for you sharing that. I have chills right now. That is so good. I think there's a lot of listeners right now. They have their pen, they have their notepads, and they're taking a ton of notes And this is so helpful. And I love what you said, when you talk about purpose, you said building a better workplace, and then championing the underdog. I love that. That is, oh my gosh, that is so good. I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, let's talk. And I know, by the way, I was just thinking also how proud your grandfathers would be of you sharing
Oh,
that story. That's so cool. I love that. Hey, well, let's talk leadership. I mean, the last 2 years have been heavy. It's been a tough time. And I want to get into a little bit about what we talked a little bit about the Global Workforce Symposium. But before that, I always like to ask this question. There's so many different ways to define leadership. I was just wondering if somebody says, "Hey, Andrew, hey, how would you define leadership?" How would you respond to that?
oh, because you can be a leader in so many different ways, and there's so many different kinds of leaders. So I don't know if I can define it, but I can certainly the type of leadership that I
Mm-hmm.
embrace is, and it's no surprise given what I just said, I think, it is servant leadership. So
Mm.
um, I am a leader to support the people that I work with, and to not only accomplish a shared goal that we have, but help them either get better in their job, or if they hit a roadblock somewhere, to help them figure out a way through or around the roadblock. Um, I also this didn't occur to me, but somebody shared this with me, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. They were talking about me, and I didn't think about it. I had never thought about it in this way, and that was, Andrew will never ask you to do anything he wouldn't be prepared to do himself. And
Hmm.
and I was like, that's true. I wouldn't. So you have to, as a leader, you have to delegate a lot of work. But I would never ever ask anybody to do something I wasn't prepared to, whether it's really hard or whatever. I would never ask anybody to do something. So I think that that was helpful when they were talking to a new member of the team, and they were sort of asking, what's Andrew like to work with? And then she relayed that to me later. I thought that made a lot of sense.
What a great personal brand. Because I talk about personal branding a lot, and personal branding isn't what you think it is. It's what they are saying about you when you're not there.
Yeah,
It's
well,
so good. That's
yeah, I think, but there are some downsides, and this is something where I read a book recently. It was a Malcolm Gladwell book
yeah.
about talking to strangers, and it was the theme of the book, and there were lots of
Okay.
stories. But
Yep.
the one of the pearls that I got out of it was, you know, identify what other people do really well that you don't do well, and maybe it's something that you didn't think you wanted to do well. Like, one thing that I have a hard time with um, is putting myself in the spotlight. I'm very uncomfortable with that, and I manage my team really well, but I don't manage up particularly well. I don't sort
Mhm.
of go in and do a big PowerPoint on how much work we did or how much money we saved or whatever. But there are people who are really good at it, and I was used to think so almost disdainfully, gosh, I don't want to be like that. But then I realized I'm missing something in my
Mhm.
portfolio, and that's something I personally need to work on. So I'm going to identify a couple of people that do that really well, and then pick their brain and just say, hey, what is it? How do you find the stuff to talk about? How do you do that without feeling like you're bragging? Because they certainly don't
Yeah.
come across as bragging. But I'm by no means a complete leader. There's a lot of stuff we all need to work on, but I certainly know what I need to work on.
Oh man. Oh man, that's so good. Self-awareness is so important for all of it. Well, let me just say this. I think the first thing, and you didn't ask me for advice, but I'm just going to say this: go read your LinkedIn recommendations, because here's what I wrote down when I was thinking about our conversation today, and it was from a gentleman that said, "You possess a unique ability to bring enthusiasm to a team." And I was just thinking, wow, I wonder if he like knows that. I mean, yeah, he accepted the LinkedIn recommendation, but does he really know he brings that enthusiasm to the team? And I watched you. I want to talk about GWS because I watched you on a couple different panels, and I thought you were like you were great. One panel, you were pretty much facilitating the questions to the group. I thought it was really, really good. It was around the household goods moving industry. And the other one, you were actually on the panel with some pretty heavy hitters. Robert Horsley, you had Horst Galo on there, and then also Russell Wilson's brother Harry Wilson, who's on the podcast next week.
Oh, cool.
Talking about limitless minds. And then, of course, that was moderated by Lynn Greenberg. And so I would love for you to just let's talk about that for a second. I mean, I would love for you to talk a little bit about, well, let me just start here. How did it feel being on the panel and being, I don't know, I guess you could say part of that spotlight?
Yeah, you know what? I've grown comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Not just, the nerves that used to plague me whenever I was going to be on a panel or present or anything. And miraculously, I don't even feel it anymore. I don't think my heart rate changes a beat. So I've learned to just sort of embrace the moment and hopefully contribute something, particularly when you've got such a heavy hitting panel. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, fine. You talked about finding your lane. It's like, what can you contribute to this conversation? So that's what I try to do.
Yeah. You did a fantastic job. I know Megan Muir was on there, Ben Heller, just a lot of great mobility professionals. And so I want to just touch though on this session. You talked about how can we do better? And we were really talking about how mobility, innovative technology can really drive a new value in the war on talent. I just thought that was pretty fascinating discussion, but you said something that really caught my attention. And you said something around mobility I didn't write this down, but mobility will be recognized when we can hold it in the palm of our hand. Do you remember saying that? And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, something similar to that. And I've believed it for years, and I think we're getting closer to it. But what I mean is when we can make the mobility experience accessible to the employee, the partner, the kids, whomever we're moving. And in this, we're talking about embracing more and more sort of the non-Western family. So you could throw parents into that, grandparents, whoever you're moving. If you can create an experience that they can access with a really great user experience in the palm of their hand, then we will be fulfilling our potential. And we have, there's no question we're making progress in technology, but we have a long way to go. And the challenge we have now is there are so many different pieces and component parts. And whether you're talking about your own internal HR system in your company, or a relocating employee tapping into relocation services that are provided digitally, it has to be integrated and seamless. And I think once we accomplish that, and we still have a ways to go to get there, we will have realized our potential.
Yeah, I love that. And I actually was sharing with Ben after it may not have been after that session, but sometime during the conference, I was just sharing that, you work for a very large organization. And there were some very large organizations represented at the conference, but there are a lot of organizations that do mobility where the leader mobility is a very small piece of their job until it happens and it becomes consuming of all of their job. And so I was just thinking, that mobility awareness, I feel like at times there's a big spotlight on it, and then other times it's really small, and we got to figure out how do we get that to be a bigger spotlight before the move happens, not, hey, it's time to move.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think we all suffer. I remember early in my career trying to convince the head of HR to pay attention to mobility. And we had some opportunities that I wanted him to buy into and support. And I brought my slides to him and I sat down and I went through and explained what I was trying to do. And he said, Andrew, I get what you're doing. I really like it, but you're talking about 5% of all of our employees. And I have to worry about 100% of all our employees. I don't have the energy to focus on the 5%. And I refined my approach. I, figured out how to make this relevant. And ultimately, I was able to find the metrics that he really cared about, like 5% he doesn't care about. But when I talk about the total cost or the investment we're making in mobility in relation to our net revenue, then he was paying attention. He's like, okay, it's only 5%, but this was at a time in our company's history, another organization where we were really struggling financially, and we were spending as much on mobility as we were making in net revenue. I mean, that's crazy. So pay attention, because this is a big number that we need to get more disciplined around. And that did the trick. That got his attention, and we were on our way after that.
Man, I'm glad you shared that, because a lot of times it's just a matter of how we frame it up, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting here talking about 5% of the people are moving. Now all of a sudden you bring it to another angle and you're like, hey, look how much we're spending, or what that revenue to a profit looks like, right?
Yeah. And that's why, one of the panels I was on was talking about ROI. And I think it's so important for mobility professionals to understand the value they are creating for their organization, and then be able to report out on it, and in non-traditional sorts of ways. And there's really great information shared by my fellow panelists and how they look at it. But it's all about finding what matters to your organization and putting what you do in the context of those other priorities. And then you'll get into that, okay, let's start to be more strategic about how we do this. And let's not just react and say, oh my gosh, last week somebody went to their new location, help them figure it out, to, okay, where do we need our workforce to be strengthened, or what kinds of experiences do we need to provide? What markets do we need to grow in? How do we plan for that? Find the right people to do it, give them the right support and resources to be as successful as possible, and then have a plan for when it's over, and have that plan before they go. Don't just say, oh, we'll figure it out later. Think about the exit strategy for that assignment. And once you start operating as a much more sort of, with greater commercial acumen, you will get that seat at the table, and you'll be able to have those conversations. I recognize the challenge that either there's really small mobility teams that just have a really hard time getting out from under the work,
Yeah.
or it's somebody's, fractional part of their job, and, they have to respond when somebody asks them about it. But to the extent that you can find the space to start thinking that way, it will be a game changer for that organization's mobility practice.
Oh, that's really good. It reminds me of a presentation I've done. And I've talked about five strategies to buy into the C-suite. And it's almost like a sales lens. You gotta build trust within the organization. You can't skip that part. You got to get people to try, and then you have to define a problem, but not a problem, but the right problem that aligns with the organization objectives and goals, and then you got to build a business case, and that's the where you're talking about. A lot of people, man, they just don't have the bandwidth to just spend the time on that if they're not doing a whole lot. But once you get that built out, you can really do a lot of things, right?
Yeah, you get licensed to play in a much bigger space, which is where it gets really fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. Hey, let me ask you this. I'm just curious, over the last couple of years, did you see a major shift in your mobility just from the COVID, the pandemic? Did you move less people, or did anything change?
Yeah, massive changes because the borders closed. So it came to almost a screeching halt. There were minor numbers of moves. And it frankly hasn't returned to where we'd like it to be in our old numbers. And some are thinking maybe it never will. I'm more optimistic. I'm just by nature, I'm optimistic. So I think we will return. It'll look different, and we'll be doing things differently. But I still think we're at least another year away from sort of it becoming more reflective of what we used to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, I want to ask you one more question before we shift over to to your volunteer roles. I want to ask you, and this is really for the listeners. You started out as a mobility leader in your organization, and you've become a leader of Total Rewards. And just for people who are listening right now saying, I want to continue to grow in my career, I want to become the leader. maybe, I don't know, is there a tip or something you can share that you helped you kind of navigate on your upward mobility?
Yeah, I think you just generally, I would say, don't be afraid to make changes and don't be afraid to make lateral moves if you can see that being the path to advancement later. And I have a couple of examples in my career where I made a less than obvious move between organizations, but I knew going in that would position me for a better role later. So I think that the moral of the story on that one is, think about where you want to end up and think about the experiences you need to acquire to help you get there, and make some sort of non-traditional, maybe not climbing the ladder in a vertical way, maybe go horizontally for a little while, establish, acquire more skills, establish yourself in a broader way, and then that opens up more opportunity. So within that, it's, sometimes make some non-traditional moves. But the other is, and this is often the case in mobility, because you really can only have one head of mobility. And you might have, whether you're a small department or a large department, you might be looking at that leader saying, I really want that job, but that leader's not going anywhere. So you have to be prepared to make the move to a different organization when the opportunity arises, because it's yours to build, is the EY thing, but it really is up to each of us to build our own career. And you have to think about making those moves to make it happen. I used to get flack from people, and they would say, oh, where's Andrew Walker today? Because he's changed jobs again. And I've been working for over 30 years, and I've had 7 different employers. And the shortest place I ever worked was not even 2 years. And then the longest was 8 years. With EY, I'm just over 6 now. So getting long in the tooth here. But I never got defensive about it. It was, I knew what I needed to do to get myself to where I wanted to go. And I found the opportunities to make that happen. So that's a very long-winded answer, but I think it's up. You can't wait for somebody else to make it happen for you. You have to make the moves yourself.
Oh man, I love that. Hey, let's talk. I want to continue on this leadership topic, but I want to talk volunteer leadership for a few minutes. First of all, you are currently the chair of the board for Worldwide ERC. So first of all, thank you for serving, doing what you do. I was just wondering if, for the listeners, who is Worldwide ERC, and what is your role as chair?
Sure. So Worldwide ERC is the industry association for the mobility ecosystem. So whether you are a service provider or you're a corporate, this is the organization that is really working on behalf of all of its constituents. It's a membership organization, so of course we want people to join, to both support the organization and get greater benefit from it. But we look at our responsibility as multifaceted. So there's education. So we provide a lot of training resources and certifications. We provide networking and news and sort of insights into our industry. We provide advocacy. So we have very strong and in continuing to get stronger all the time. Part of the organization that's focusing on sort of influencing positive change for our industry, whether it's lobbying a government or local authorities, what have it, whether it's in immigration or tax. So that's sort of in a nutshell. And then of course we're also known for our conferences, which probably the large, not just probably, I know it's the largest industry event in mobility is put on by Worldwide ERC.
And then you're the chair of the board. What is that a 1-year term, 2-year term, and what's your role there?
Sure, it's a 1-year term, but
okay.
It's actually a 3-year term in one. So you're the chair-elect.
They tell you 1 year, but you're really in there for 3.
So it's kind of a cool system. So you're only chair for a year, but you have a year as chair-elect, where you basically, as I call it, you have the training wheels on. So you can learn from the current chair and observe sort of, okay, how do you run the meetings? How do you help set the strategy? You're also responsible for the performance management of the organization CEO. So there is actual real management responsibility that goes with the role. But then, so you can watch that as the chair-elect, then you do it as the chair, and then you're ex officio for your third year, which is a non-voting member of the board, but you're there to provide additional support and guidance to the chair incumbent. So, so this year I'm the chair, and next year I'll be ex officio, and I'll attend meetings. I don't, as I said, don't get to vote, but I can provide all this wisdom that I've acquired in my years on the board. And yeah, so, but that's it. And that year goes fast. I remember at the start of the year thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be a really hard year. I have weekly calls with the CEO, which are actually great.
Yeah.
Then we have XCOM calls, and then we have regular board calls, board meetings when we could meet in person. So there's a lot of meetings, and then there's ad hoc projects and things you work on, but it's really rewarding. And I did it, and the vast majority of people that get involved with the board do it because they want to give back to this industry that's done so much for them. That was absolutely the case for me.
Well, there's some phenomenal people that are part of that. And of course, Lynn Shotwell, the CEO that's leading the efforts there. And I remember the message at GWS was the power of one. I thought that was a great message.
Yeah. Full credit to Lynn and her team for all of that. They did a phenomenal job across the board on the messaging to the execution. It was the GWS Global Workforce Symposium, which was just a couple of weeks ago, was really great.
I'm excited about the future of mobility and worldwide ERC, and I appreciate everything you're doing. Hey, I want to before we run out of time here, I want to jump onto another volunteer area, and I was reading a little bit about this other organization that you're part of as well. With all that free time you have, as the founder, I guess you're the founder and president of 11 Plus. Talk a little bit about that organization and who you serve there.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So first of all, I will say that there are silver linings to COVID. As bad as COVID was, it stopped me from traveling all over the place like a crazy man. And I knew predictably I would be home. And it allowed me to explore different things that I've been interested in, that I've thought passively about for a long time, and actually take action. So thanks for having that space and that time to think and reflect and actually do. So last December, it was officially founded. The work probably leading 3 or 4 months before that, a lot of prep work to set up an organization called Elevate to Even Plus, which is 11 Plus shorthand. We are a nonprofit that finds and funds paid internships for students of color from low-income backgrounds. And so it's based on the premise that there is tremendous systemic racism in the United States that most people don't see and recognize. And only because I was not traveling and I had some time to do some reading and have a lot of great conversations with people, I got myself a lot smarter on the issues. And I realized that there really are a lot of hurdles for people of color in this country, whether you like it or not, or can see it or not, they exist. And I thought, I need to do something personally to, in a very small way, but still proactively try to address this by providing opportunities for people who otherwise would be locked out of these opportunities, these experiences. And as I told you, I started my career as an intern, and I got my job out of college because I was an intern. If you're a person of color from a low income background, you might not have access to internships. You might not know they exist. Or more importantly, most of these internships are unpaid and you can't afford to work for free. Now, my summer, I did not work for free. I found a company that would pay me, but a lot of organizations provide these on an unpaid basis. Unpaid internships actually perpetuate inequality, because if you think about it, the old model, and I work in nonprofit space, so we provide interns to nonprofits. Okay. The model in nonprofits was you have a donor who writes a large check, and you say, thank you for that. How can I help you? Oh, you can give my son or daughter a job this summer. And they would work, often usually unpaid, and get great experience and start to establish their own network and get something for their resume that looks more impressive to future employers. But if you don't have a parent who's writing large checks to organizations, you don't have access to those opportunities on an equal footing, or you can't afford to do it, right? So we disrupt that by having relationships with schools and enrichment programs to identify students, and nonprofit organizations to secure roles. And then the third group is our donors. We raise money so that we can pay the nonprofit organizations to in turn pay the students. And my organization doesn't make any money. We purely voluntary, but we then the students apply for these internships, and they have these really amazing transformative experiences. We did our first group this summer. There were 10 kids. The stories that came out of that were so rewarding. And I've been starting to tell this story that, you spend your time thinking about, what is my get rich idea? What am I going to do to finally make my fortune? And you passively or actively think about it all the time. Like, well, how am I going to afford that mansion on the hill? And I finally had my best idea, but it's making me a different kind of rich. I didn't see this coming, but I'm just feeling so great about this. And pretty much everybody I talk to say, that's a great idea, I want to help. So it's bringing a lot of people together. And we're now looking at it. There's a small group of people in our industry who are saying, how can we take this model for the benefit of the industry? So I'm working with Bob Rosing in particular, but we've reached out to a number of C-suite executives in our space to get on board with this idea that we reach out to inner city colleges and universities, as well as historically Black colleges and universities, and develop a speaker series where mobility professionals go in and talk to the students to raise awareness of, this is what the mobility industry does, but also these are the careers you could have if you came into our space. And then in the summers, offering some of these kids internships with companies in our industry. And the difference is my organization wouldn't raise the money. The hosting organization would pay the kids directly, but it creates a diversity pipeline. But also right now, where we are in this war for talent, there are so many unfilled jobs in the relocation space, and there's so much talent out there that we're not tapping into. So it's a great way, I think, of sort of building a bridge, and is creating a second model for my organization. Eventually, 11. This is sort of on the side. It's not really under the 11 plus banner, but it's really going to be a proof of concept so that we can provide both nonprofit experiences for the students that want those, but also partnership with medium and small organizations that don't have the resources to establish some type of really, EY has an amazing diversity internship program, but we're huge, as you know. But what about those small, like 50 company organizations that really want to help and also need the resources in our field where we're so busy during the summer? What a great way to get extra people in the door. So as a model for 11 plus, this is going to be the next thing we do after, in addition to nonprofits, we'll go for the for-profit sector.
That is so great. Oh my God. I can feel your dream and your passion and your energy. And man, how exciting. I will put a link in the show notes for people that want to learn more about the organization and check that out. And it takes me back to now, I know why the gentleman wrote, you have a unique ability to bring enthusiasm to your team. Because I'm enthusiastic, I'm energized just from you sharing that, because I can tell you're definitely talking from your heart. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm loving it.
Yeah, oh man, so good. Hey, I told you the time was going to fly today, so I'm going to go ahead and shift to, it's time to accelerate. I always like to ask, do you during your off time, I'm sitting here thinking about, man, he's doing all these things. Do they even have off time? But do you read books or listen to podcasts?
I have a huge appetite to read, and I buy way too many books, and then they sit on my bedside table. There was a New Yorker cartoon of somebody's bedside table with books raised to the ceiling, and I was like, wow, they come and see my bedside table. But I do read, but I don't get through it as fast. Too many other diversions. So I'm a late adopter of podcasts, but I love them because, like when I'm mowing the lawn, I'll listen to like 3 podcasts in a row, for example.
Yeah.
So I do both, but I really need to carve out more time and have the discipline to read instead of just scrolling through my phone, which is right now one of the biggest distractions.
Oh man, listen, I'm with you on that. I have you can probably see my bookcase behind me. I've got a whole shelf of books that are 2022. Like I'm going to get to you. But every time I see a good book or somebody refers, I'm instantly ordering that. And I've got it here and I'm the same way. Oh man, that's so good. Hey, well, let me ask you this. I want to ask you just a couple more questions as we go. And that is, we're in the Thanksgiving season. This is, like I said, this is being recorded the first day of November, and we're going to play the last week of November. I would just like to ask you, like, Andrew, like, what are you grateful for?
That's I am grateful for so much. I really am. I'm grateful for my family, for my children, for the experiences that I've had. I am having, you know, do I have the best, highest paying job in the world? Absolutely not. But I have to tell you, I'm doing a lot better than I ever thought I would when I was a kid. So I'm really grateful for that. I do. I'm just really appreciative of so much. I've got a lot of really great stuff going on, and I have a spouse who makes me laugh so hard and love spending time with her. So I've got an abundance of riches, honestly.
That's so cool. Oh man. Oh, this has been so good. This has been so good. Okay. So I'm going to ask you the last question here. And this is like my favorite question. I love to ask this question to my guests. And here's the question. Andrew, 10 years older, is around the corner knocking at that door, and you are going to go answer that door. What's he going to say to you?
It's funny that because I've been reflecting on this lately, because I'm closer to the end of my career than I am to the start, a lot closer to the end. And only recently have I had to say, stop thinking about when you're done working. Find things that bring you joy that you want to do now. Don't make excuses that you have time to do that later. Start doing that stuff now, whether it's travel. I just ordered a boat. I've wanted a boat my whole life, a small motor boat. I've spent summers on the beach in Connecticut. I've seen boats going by my entire life. And I finally was like, I'm not going to wait till I retire to buy a boat. I'm going to do it now. So that's the message that I will be giving myself in 10 years back. Like, take time to smell the roses, and don't put it off, because you never know. Yeah, I might get hit by a bus tomorrow, and then there is no 10 years from now. So yeah, we all work hard. You got to keep working hard. I'm not going to take my foot off the gas, but I'm also going to give myself a little bit of grace to do some fun stuff now and again.
Man, that's so cool. I'm so grateful that you came on the show today and we had this conversation, and that I'm able to like record it, actually share it with the world, because it's so good and you're so inspiring. So I appreciate you being on the show. Hey, for someone that they want to connect with you, or maybe they heard something you said that they want to learn a little bit more about, what would be the best way for them to connect with you, Andrew?
The absolute best way is on LinkedIn. I'm on there several times a day. I set up in 2007. I set up this group on LinkedIn, Global Mobility Management, and then in brackets HR. And we have 26,000 people in that group. And I've looked at every single person. I kid you not, every single person in that group. I've looked at them to make sure that they're in the field of mobility and they're not, some hacker or something, or mistaking what we're about. There are a lot of technology mobility people that have gotten through, and I've had to manage that. Long story short, it's been something that, like, I'll go in like 3 times a day and just see who's trying to get into the group. And when I do that, I always see messages from people on LinkedIn. So you can, by all means, if you're not in global mobility management with the HR bracket after it, you can ask to join, and then send me a message while you're at it.
Man,
Happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, that's so good. I need to go and make sure I'm in that group. Man, 26,000. Oh my God. Listen, you're doing some amazing things. That's why you're in the leadership lane. And again, I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and perspective. And I cannot wait to share this conversation.
Thanks, Bruce. It's been a lot of fun, and I probably bored your listeners to sleep, but it was fun. I enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's so good. Hey, I cannot wait to share it. I'll talk to you later.
All right.